And now, the International Vienna for Everyone. And now, the International Vienna for Everyone.
I was wondering, actually, also from the last time we met, that everyone is buying a good phone now and they take pictures on their own.
Yeah.
And how hard does it make it to be a photographer and to make a living as a photographer nowadays?
So from buying a good phone, did you say?
Well, no,
Yeah.
from let's call it competition that now let's say take an example like an event.
Yeah.
A lot of events don't hire photographers anymore because they say, all right, we don't have that budget. Clara has a new iPhone. She's going to take pictures.
I see what you mean, yeah.
Just documentation.
I did actually have some events photography work last week.
Well, I'm not saying it has disappeared, but I'm pretty sure it has slowed down a little.
I think you're probably right also with like news reporting as well. And I guess it's got pros and cons. Like if everyone's got a good enough camera on their phone, I think most, phone cameras in the last, 5 or so years are kind of decent enough for broadcast quality, aren't they? It means, if you've got people in an area where there's kind of war happening or some positive event, that suddenly happens, it means, everyone can capture that. So that's good. But I suppose it does mean there's possibly a bit less work for, what you might call professional photographers who have have spent lots of money and, invested lots of time in training to
equipment
photographer. Yeah. But I mean, I always feel like I can tell the difference, when I see the end result.
You can tell because you're a professional photographer, but the regular audience doesn't either can't tell the difference or doesn't really care much about the difference.
I mean, you're right. Yeah, I mean, there's certainly news stories. Yeah, I think probably everyone feels, or probably almost everyone is just grateful that a moment is captured, for a photo to accompany a news article that if it hadn't, if that person hadn't had a phone with them, that would have gone missed. So, but yeah, so there's that, there's that side of things. And then there's, the kind of work I appreciate that I might want framed on my wall or whatever. And that's probably always going to come from a professional photographer and camera for me anyway. There's in terms of kind of photography competitions, it's mobile photography has become more acceptable in recent years as the cameras have got better and better. But there is, any digital camera has an amount of computational element to it going on. So even if I take a photo on my Canon or Fujifilm or whatever, just by importing that onto my computer, there's things going on that the manufacturer has decided to do to the photo. So whereas mobile photography, there's a lot more computational stuff going on behind the scenes where the I don't know if you know this HDR mode where
I use that one too.
Yeah, okay.
I feel better when I use it.
I try and avoid it because I feel like you kind of get in some ways a more, well, to some people maybe it looks a more beautiful photo where like all the clouds look amazing and then the foreground of the scene looks amazing and the background looks amazing. But last time I read up on how that works, it might have changed. It like on an iPhone at least, it's taking like 3 different photos in a row and then it's merging different elements together. So you're getting like 3 photos edited into one. So when it comes to street photography, for me and a lot of purists, I feel like that the phone has done too much work in creating that image. And there's phones do even more crazy stuff these days, and like the iPhone also has this live mode where it's actually kind of taking a video. So when you take a photo,
but it allows you to choose the best version, right?
Yeah, which is handy. But I almost feel that's too many options for me. I prefer to just have a camera, click the button, And then I do a bit of kind of basic post-processing in Lightroom, but yeah, having these live photos and thinking, oh, actually I can scroll back, half a second or whatever and see how it looked then. I don't want to have, that much work, looking at every single photo at, a different time as well. And I also hate shooting in burst mode on my camera.
In what mode?
But burst mode. So maybe it has different names on different models of camera, but that's the one where, if you hold the button down, it like takes a sequence of shots like very quickly. Because I found myself going crazy, looking at those photos afterwards, and basically, there might be one bird flying in the sky, and it's like in one photo, it's 1 pixel to the left, and the next one it's moved across 1 pixel, and I just waste too much time thinking, oh, which pixel is the best pixel for that bird in the background that no one else is going to notice. So yeah, for me anyway, when it comes to street photography, I just prefer to, take the shot and I've got that one shot. And if I messed it up, then that's my fault.
Do you feel like sometimes when do you often take pictures with the phone as well when you don't have the camera with you, or you always have the camera?
I always have a camera with me, yeah.
When you're out of home, even when you're going out in the evening for a drink, you have the camera with you? Yeah,
normally, yeah. To be fair, I don't go out that often these days, but yeah, I've learned my lesson because I've been doing street photography for about 12 years, I think now. And, as time has gone by, I've just got more and more kind of addicted to it, basically. And, I've had a few occasions where I've gone out without my camera and, in my head anyway, I've thought, oh, there's an amazing scene up, I could have won all the awards in the world if only I'd brought my camera with me.
Well, now that you take your camera with you, have you won all the awards in the world?
No.
It's like that joke that if I quit smoking, I could save this amount of money and buy it, and I could have had a Ferrari with all the money that I spent on smoking. Well, look at this guy who doesn't smoke. Does he own a Ferrari?
Maybe he bought a Leica instead. That's what I would do. Well, I've not won all the awards in the world, but I certainly, and I didn't want it to make it sound like I'm all about winning awards, but I certainly. I'm sure I've captured a lot of scenes that I would have missed otherwise.
Yeah, definitely.
And in fact, like last year, I took a photo in Budapest in one of the baths there. That
I love that one.
Oh, yeah. It's called Winning Position. It's on like the homepage of my website if anyone wants to look at it. It's the very first photo there, and that one. I mean, I imagine most people wouldn't have. Maybe even brought a mobile phone with them to get that because I was in the water to take it with a camera that wasn't waterproof, so it was a bit risky. And it was in the Sechny baths. Hopefully I've pronounced that correctly. And I sort of wanted to pay homage to a Martin Parr photo taken in the same place. He's one of my all-time favorite photographers. And it's taken from above one of the outdoor pools, and they have these kind of chess sets in the water. And he took a photo of, some old men playing chess, from outside of the pool. So initially I just, because I was there and I liked that photo almost for a joke and, for my own sanity, I thought, I just, feel like I have to take that photo from that same angle. And then I was kind of looking around and kind of thinking, but there's these other people, watching the chess game. And there's this guy doing this sort of weird pose in the background. And then this woman who, looks like she's kind of tanning herself at the side of the pool. And I thought, I think the better shot is from within the water. So I sort of, bravely took my, as I say, not waterproof camera into the pool with me and just made sure it didn't get wet, and took that photo, and I'm very glad I did. Whereas, I think some mobile phones are meant to be waterproof these days, including mine. But I've never dared.
I don't think they're waterproof in the sense you can dive like 200 meters under the water, but it's more like if it's raining a little and they got a little bit wet, nothing will happen. But of course, it doesn't make sense that you can just throw the phone in the water and expect it to work because there's a charging port right there, then it's definitely open.
Yeah. And I guess because a mobile phone does so many things these days, in a way your life is kind of more ruined if your mobile phone stops working, because that's your wallet and your only means of communication to important people or whatever.
Do you use your phone? I mean, do you put everything on your phone, like the credit card?
No.
And
no, my bank is too kind of behind the times to have that option. So actually, I don't use my phone for that many things. But I
but
think
for other things, for example, if you lose your phone, would it take you 6 months to gather yourself together and all the things you lost?
I think I would be all right. I mean, I do sometimes take. I probably use my mobile phone more for video because, and obviously like photos that are more disposable. If I just want to send a photo of something amusing I've seen to my girlfriend or whatever, send it on WhatsApp, because none of my cameras are kind of new enough to have an easy way to
the
just
Bluetooth,
easily
the Wi-Fi.
None of mine can do that. So so I do use it for that, but I don't have so many what I consider kind of important photos on there, or if I do, I back them up. So I did actually, because I was living in London until I moved here about 5.5 years ago. But I did, at one point I was, walking around late at night in what I considered to be quite a safe street, and I got sort of mugged at knife point. And the guys took my phone. And,
where was this?
This was in London, in Stoke Newington, where I lived for a long time. So, and it was just, it's like 11 o'clock at night, and these guys sort of pulled out this big kitchen knife on me. And, I just put my hands in the air and let them take whatever they wanted. So they went through my pocket. It's a bit of a blur because I don't know, went into kind of defense mode. So
Were you alone?
Yeah, I was alone. Yeah. But it was it's like a sort of residential street, with, fairly, middle class kind of well off people living on it. But just because it was 11 o'clock at night, and I think it was a weekday, most people had gone to bed, and, these guys were being relatively quiet, and it all happened quite quickly.
Holy shit.
So, so I did. So they took my phone, but I think I had backed it up, a few weeks before. So, and I didn't have it insured. So that was the main annoyance that, I ended up having to spend quite a lot of money on it.
Would it have been easy to prove it to the insurance that they stole the phone from you? That you get mugged?
Well, I went to there was like a takeaway restaurant nearby. So I went to them and called the police immediately. They turned up very quickly.
So you had a police
report number, yeah. And the police were really good. They were driving me around the block, seeing if we could spot them. Obviously, these guys had just hid somewhere, as anyone would
I don't
do.
think they would have stayed there, yeah.
No, but I mean, I did actually say, like, to one of the police officers, perhaps if you drive me home, I can go on my laptop and use this Find My iPhone thing, yeah. And the policeman said, actually, we don't need to do that. You can just log in on my iPhone. So, this was probably only about 10 or 15 minutes after it all happened that, they turned up and I was trying this. But, they had turned my phone off. So that stopped that function.
Oh, when it's off,
when it's off,
you can't it's find a useless option.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's not entirely useless.
That's only if you forgot where you left it at home.
Yeah.
Then you can find it.
There's another thing it does. I only know of how it works on iPhone, but you can also add ticks and things that say, like, next time someone turns my phone on, erase all the data and add a password to it, because I didn't even have a sort of password at the time on my phone. But, every now and again, I've checked over the years. This was maybe 10 years ago or something. And it seems like no one ever turned the phone on again, or they erased it, or
kind of erased it and
or whatever. Yeah.
Reset it somehow.
Yeah.
Probably they know how to do it now.
Yeah. But it's kind of I was quite surprised that this, this Find My iPhone thing just is completely useless if someone turns the phone off if they've stolen it. Which,
what I think is that technically it can find your iPhone somehow. I think it's not that hard because the chip, the GPS or whatever it is inside there, it's supposed to work anytime.
Yeah.
Because it's a chip.
Yeah.
But why they don't allow you to find it is that because that would mean that every time your phone is off, it means that someone else might be spying on you.
Yeah.
So it's mostly like a privacy thing, which it's a bit mind-blowing because we know it's there, but they just don't allow it because it would be a privacy violation.
Yeah.
So I think that's why you can't track it when it's off, because that would mean that then everyone can track it when it's off, and when you try to switch your phone off not to be tracked, you then would think, but I'm anyway tracked, and it turning the phone on.
It's a shame when you use the Find My iPhone from a different device, you can't click something that says, "Oh, forget about my privacy. I just want my phone back." But anyway,
how do you feel about for example, mobile phone competitions? You think that should exist? Or maybe not that they shouldn't exist or should exist, but should be considered at the same level as professional competitions with professional cameras or for professional photographers, or they should be like like in football, there's this different series of playing soccer.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, there's some very good mobile photographers out there, and I spend a lot of my time taking from street photography, editing it in Lightroom. When I can, I go to different street photography festivals around the world. I just went to the Italian Street Photography Festival in Rome, which is great. And a lot of these competitions and festivals have their own competitions too. They normally have, as you say, a separate category for mobile photography. And I don't these days, because, particularly on, phone cameras you get now, the quality is pretty amazing. But it's a slightly different skill. I think, the people who are good at it have a great skill, and they are, should be considered great photographers. But yeah, just because of what I was talking about earlier, particularly with street photography, where, pretty much every photographer I know has a slightly different take on what should be allowed in street photography. And I think most people would agree that it has to be a candid shot, so it's not posed. Other than that, everyone's got slightly different ideas about what's acceptable. So, one of my favorite street photographers, a British guy called Nick Turpin, who was one of the founder of In Public, which is, one of the great street photography collectives. He, of everyone I know, he probably has the sort of strictest rules as to what counts as a street photo.
Camera?
Well, kind of a bit of everything, really. So he, certainly would never accept a photo if it's posed, which, I agree with. Anything kind of computational, he would also discount as a street photo. So, I think there was an example of someone in his collective took a photo of an unposed scene, but using the panoramic mode on their phone. So you're not getting like a single shot of one image at one precise time, because the panoramic mode is like taking a long photo as you scroll across over 1 second or whatever it is. So I would agree with him on that as well, that's not a true street photo. So I suspect he would also not consider, a photo where an iPhone has done various things, and you've taken a live shot and the iPhone has selected what it thinks is the best frame from that 1 second it's been filming, and this HDR mode and so on. But Yeah, I'm a bit more flexible about the kind of computational side of things because as I said earlier, I think pretty much any digital camera is doing computational things because it is a computer. I mean, and the manufacturers have made it import in a certain way. And, you know, I never leave a photo exactly as it was. I always tweak it a little bit in Lightroom. So nothing too over the top, I don't think, but, you know, just maybe cropping it a bit, or if it's at an angle I don't like, you know, making it sort of perfectly horizontal.
But I'm still curious about, because mobile phones, yes, it's true, they're getting better in taking pictures. But that's the way it is. I think that also when the first cameras were coming out, when the first digital camera came out, I think might have been the same discussion, like, oh, we should use digital, we should use film, that's the real professional thing.
Yeah.
But then, of course, everyone now uses digital, and they use film only for let's say for a hobby. But if you really want to do the best thing, it's digital.
Yeah.
So shouldn't mobile phones also just be considered, because it doesn't matter, they can compete with the quality of the picture for sure, and if also the composition is good, why should it be discarded only because it's taken with a phone, first thing? And second, imagine if suddenly your camera, they introduce a camera that you can make calls with it. So
yeah, well, yeah. So first of all, I realised I didn't kind of properly answer your previous question.
That's fine.
So I would say it's less about having a separate category for mobile photography and, you know, regular whatever you think that is, and more about whether it's a kind of computational image. So similarly, you know, someone with the same camera as me could end up doing some really, you know, they could do an HDR shot. You can do HDR shots and, you know, stacking photos and there are all sorts of things you can do to a photo on a, you know, what you might deem a regular camera. But where a computer has done a lot of additional things to it, and it's not just a straight out of the camera or, you know, basic edited photo. So I would almost say it's more a case of, you know, if you were going to have separate categories for these things, you know, have a, you know, images taken using, you know, a lot of computation and images not. So it's less to do with the fact it's a mobile phone. And you can, there are certain apps you can get. There's one I have on my iPhone called Halide, which is very good. And it lets you take photos in RAW mode, RAW, which is the file format that, you know, professional photographers use on their camera as well. And that mode doesn't apply computational things to your photo, and it gives you a far greater flexibility in what you can tweak afterwards. So anything taken in RAW mode, as long as it's not been, you know, overly post-processed on a mobile phone, I would say that, you know, could belong in the same category as, you know, something taken on a camera. And you mentioned, you know, the attitude when digital cameras first came out versus analog cameras. But a lot of analog photography has been, you know, what these days we call photoshopped. You know, crazy things were done to, you know, negatives of quite famous photos. There's one, hopefully I've got the photographer right, a famous image by Fan Ho, and it's a lovely image, and it's of like a sort of, trying to describe it, it's a kind of perfectly triangular shadow of a woman standing next to a wall, and the woman is...
Oh, I know that one. I know that
and
one,
that shadow was added afterwards, you know, in the darkroom, so it wasn't there. Wow. So to me, you know, that's not a street photo, but I mean, it's a nice image. And it's, you know, it's one of these, you know, if you're like me and you're on Twitter or Instagram and you follow all sorts of different photography accounts, it seems to pop up every few days. And normally if you look at the comments, you'll see someone saying, oh, this was not actually like this when the photographer took it. It was added in the darkroom. So probably most people don't care about that. But yeah, that I wouldn't. That shouldn't be accepted into a street photography competition. That would.
Yeah, but it's like when you see a movie, and some movies have visual effects and some others don't, but they are still considered movies.
Yeah,
because it's about also what they transmit. The basic of the photograph that you're mentioning, it is taken on the street. It is real, and it's post-processed a little to give a better image of what the author wanted to express. Maybe he imagined that the shadow was there when he took the picture. He wished for it, and then he found a way to add it. So you think it shouldn't be considered photography, or it's just that it shouldn't be added in street photography competitions?
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess photography is the overarching name for all of this. So all of this stuff I would consider photography. But yeah, street photography is a different thing. And yeah, as I say, every single street photographer I know, when I talk to them about, what do you think about allowing this thing? What do you think about allowing that thing? Everyone has a slightly different view of what is acceptable.
So it's as long as it's realistic, we can agree.
Yeah.
But if you add a dragon there, it's not street photography anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, normally if you're entering a competition, or even if you've submitted something to a newspaper or a news agency, they all have different rules to each other. And I forgot if it was Reuters or one of the big news agencies a few years ago actually. I think they stopped allowing submissions of raw photos, which you would think would be the perfect thing to send them, and they only accepted sort of straight out of the camera JPEGs, because I think they considered there was less chance someone had edited that. I don't know if that's still their stance on this, but it's just everyone has a different view. But I think as long as you don't, as the viewer of the photo, you don't feel cheated. So street photography for me, and I'm sure most people, normally has people in, but it doesn't always have to have people. I think as long as
it has to have a living thing, though. There is sort of a paraphrasation of this.
I wouldn't know. I think it has to show signs of life. So you get. I mean, I've done a series. It's not the most original series, but it's called Trashtopia, where it's. I started it I went to Cuba at the end of 2016, and just was looking at the pavement and thought, the rubbish or the trash on the pavement here seems so different to what I, see back home in London at the time. So I took photos just of this trash on the pavement. It might be like a bit of sweet corn someone's eaten and thrown away, or they had these little tubes of paper. They looked a bit like spliffs, but they had little peanuts in them, I think. And I then decided to try and show the character of a place by its waste. So on my website I've got this Trashtopia series, and it was exhibited in Oxford a few years ago. So I would definitely say that doesn't have a person in it, but it shows signs of human life in it. You're seeing what people have discarded, and it still tells a story. That telling a story is a very important part of it. And for me, like the most important thing with street photography is, you have one image you would be happy to have on your wall that you might look at every day for the rest of your life, and possibly every now and again notice something new in it, and your head might conjure up a story as to what's going on in it. If you've got friends come around and have a look at it, they might see a completely different story going on in that photo. That's what makes a good.
Talking about telling a story, have you ever thought of doing a film or a short film, or because that's what the street photography is anyways, telling a story? So would you do a longer version of a street photography, let's say something with film, a bit experimental? How do you see yourself as a film director?
I watch a lot of films. I've got huge respect for people who are film directors. My sister's a film producer. She's just about to start shooting a film in Cornwall, which I'm very excited about.
What film? Big production?
I've actually forgot the name of it. Her name's Judith Goldrei. So, hopefully by the time this comes out, there'll be sort of more information about it online and so on. It just for me, that's personally not my passion in doing that, because although it sounds like a kind of similar skill, and I guess it is, it's a fairly different process. For me, the fun things about street photography are, having my camera with me every time I go outside, and that feeling that, that amazing scene, that I'll want to look at again and again, could be just around the corner, even if it's raining, even if I'm on the U-Bahn, wherever I am. It's a very, very exciting feeling. It's probably similar to, what kind of collectors get, people who like collecting Pokemon or stamps or whatever.
Or dead bodies.
Yeah.
There are some like this.
Yeah. Not me. And I like the idea of, just a still image telling a story. That's a different skill to a whole, having a hour and a half or 3 or 4 hours seems to be the case with some directors these days, having that a long amount of time to tell a story, so that's just not personally my passion, but I do, because my day job is as a graphic designer.
I was just going to ask you that. I was just going to ask you, because it might be a bit different if you were in London, where you're from, maybe living at your own place, not paying a rent. But when you're living abroad, you definitely have to do something to pay your bills. And I was going to ask you, does your photography job pay the bills, or how does it work?
Yeah, definitely doesn't pay the bills. I would like it if it could, but so I've been doing graphic design for longer, since 2001.
You studied?
I didn't actually. No, I did a degree in physics with astrophysics.
In physics?
Yeah, with astrophysics.
Wow!
And it was, this phrase people like to say, "Oh, it's not rocket science." It kind of was a bit, and it was very difficult.
Wow.
And I kind of ended up doing that degree a bit randomly. I kind of knew I wanted to go to university. I went to Manchester University, which I loved being in Manchester, mainly because of the music scene and the friends I made there. But
did you graduate?
I did just.
Wow.
Yeah. But my degree was basically a lot of I found it very difficult maths, and I was okay at maths, but not the level I think required to be good in this field. So a lot of my friends from this degree have either gone into finance, because finance also
there's money in finance.
Well, yeah,
literally
money. Yeah,
there's money in finance.
That also often requires a great skill in maths. Or some friends have gone into sort of education, or one of my friends, Tamsin Edwards, Dr. Tamsin Edwards, she was in Vienna recently, actually, for a conference. She's a sort of highly respected climate scientist in England these days, and often, when there's a news report about climate change or whatever, she's on TV. I scraped through that degree. About halfway through, I thought, I'm really not sure I'm doing the right thing, because I was like halfway through, I just thought, I can't be bothered to start again. I'll just try and get to the end, which I managed. And then after that, I moved back to my family home in Oxford, and I was living with my parents for a little bit. And then at the point where they sort of started to mention that I should start paying rent to them, I thought, I want to move out. Which was a good thing. I was doing, just sort of for, I think about a year, maybe 6 months or a year, doing various just temping jobs, just data entry, quite boring jobs. And I kind of forget the timeline of this because some of this actually happened while I was at university. But yeah, during one of the university breaks, I was sort of back home in Oxford for the summer holiday, I think. And I went to a Metallica concert in Milton Keynes. And on my way back, I was waiting in a bus stop to get back to Oxford. And I got chatting to this guy who was there also waiting to get back to Oxford. And he told me about his job. And, it totally blew my mind. I was like, hang on a minute, this is what I want to do. He worked for a computer games company in Oxford. And he was saying, I spent my days, building these 3D models of monsters and guns and, crazy environments. And, if we need the sound effect of a monster, we just, bear in mind this was like late 90s. We just go to
the zoo and record the monster.
It wasn't quite that, but it was just, he said, we just go to this shed at the back of the game studio and, just get out a mini disc player and go, and that goes in the game. So I actually stayed in touch with him, and I got a bit of work, I think the following holiday, as a games tester at this company. And then when I went back to university, I went away and just taught myself 3D Studio Max, which was the 3D software they used. And then after I moved back home, I happened to bump into this same guy again in the pub in Oxford and said, I've been learning the software I know you guys use. And luckily there was a job going and I got the job there. So I'd since I was a kid, I'd loved drawing. And, most of my notes from university are covered in drawings. And it was never something I thought, could lead to a job. I always thought, I had to do some, kind of academic thing rather than artistic thing.
Like finance.
Yeah, yeah. But somehow, that love of art,
So that's how you pay your bills.
So I worked at this games company for 2 years and, I was working on games. So the company owned, don't know how many people would have heard of it, but there's a comic in England called 2000 AD. They bought that comic while I was there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we were sort of making games about Judge Dredd and that kind of thing. So I enjoyed that for a couple of years. But after a while, I started thinking I was getting a bit bored of only making games where you're walking around with a gun shooting things. And I thought I want to use my design skills to do something more useful. So I ended up moving into the area of education.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when I moved to London in 2003. I worked for an e-learning company called New Media, and still one of the most fun jobs I've ever had. Really lovely bunch of people. It was quite a small company, about 50 people. And we were making like interactive science lessons for school children. And it was quite advanced. They were quite advanced sort of
20 years ago,
at the time, yeah. And this was in the days when people still bought CD-ROMs rather than. I think the files were too big to run on the web, so we had to sell these CDs. But they were used by like tens of thousands of schools in England, and I actually got to use a bit of my degree occasionally, if it was a physics lesson. So yeah, so I've stuck with design, and that normally pays the bills. I found it a bit more difficult since moving to Vienna because although I've been learning German for the past 5 years, I'm by no means fluent. And I found a lot of job adverts I see are for require fluent German. So most of the work I've done since moving here has been, freelance work, often for companies back in England. So I kind of do a mix of that and the photography, and trying out different things that might earn me some money from the photography. So, for example, I did this events photography last week, and I run a group called Shoot Vienna, which is a sort of street photography walk and workshop group. It's on the Meetup app. Mm-hmm. There's a link to it on my website as well. And maybe once or twice a month, I organize a trip somewhere, that I think is photogenic, maybe a good place to learn street photography. So sometimes they're in Prater, sometimes by the Donau. Just I try and mix it up a bit, because there are a few people who come back every time, so I want to make sure they get a different experience each time, and it's normally an hour and a half or 2 hours, and I give a presentation on street photography at the beginning for about 20 or 30 minutes. So yeah, I recommend it.
Do you get along with? Are there other foreign street photographers in Vienna that you get along with, or do you do like photo walks, get feedback, discuss, or I don't know, compete with?
Yeah, I don't feel competitive with them because everyone's producing different images.
It's not like it's different levels. It's in street photography that if you compare two pictures, there's not really which is a better one, but they are totally different, right?
Yeah, of the people I whose work I really like. Yeah, obviously there's some terrible street photography out in the world. You only have to click, go on Instagram and click the street photography hashtag, and you just think, oh, this person just waved their phone around and clicked a random image, and why does anyone like that? Anyway, but of the people whose work I like here, there's a great Turkish street photographer called Fuat Altintaş. I think he's lived here in Vienna around the same amount of time as me, about 5 years. His work is really, really great, and I think I first met him actually he came on one of my Shoot Vienna walks, and I think I was already following him on Instagram, so I knew this guy is great. He didn't need the talk at the beginning of my walk on what street photography is, because he was already doing really great work. So he's great. There's a guy who lives in Linz, who I've also been following for a number of years, called Enrico Marcus Essel. And I've never actually met him. I think he's in Vienna every now and again, and I'm sort of hoping I'll catch him one day. But his work is really great. Some non-street photographers. There's a great photographer called Kati Bruder, who I actually made friends with before I moved here, because once I knew, so I moved to Vienna because of my girlfriend's job, and she moved here maybe 6 months before I did, because the job kind of started immediately, and I stayed in London, tried starting learning German before I moved here. But I applied for an exhibition, a kind of group exhibition in Vienna before I moved here, and I kind of made some friends via that. Kati Bruder, I don't know how she describes her photography, but it's more portrait photography. She has a great series of people in their doorways, and you kind of get a sense of their kind of life by seeing, what's going on inside their building.
Seems like a good environment you have here already with other photographers. Yeah.
One more I should mention. Another great friend, Ingmar Vincenz. Hopefully, or Vincenz. I really should know how to pronounce his surname. He's a good friend of mine, and he does a sort of a bit of everything. I would say, just I think whatever scene he likes. So sometimes street photography, sometimes landscape, whatever. But it's all really great. But it's a nice way to. For me also to have made friends, to already have this thing I was interested in before I moved here. And then as soon as I got here, or even before, I was like, okay, I need to find my people. And it's a very accepting scene, also with this festival I went to in Rome a few weeks ago, because you've got that shared passion, you're probably going to get on with that, with all of the other people there. So it's almost like you've got like these pre-made friends waiting for you.
Yeah. And how do you get along here with do you also have Austrian friends? Is it easy to break the circles?
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, so Ingmar and Kati, who I just mentioned, they're both Austrian. Technically, as of the start of this year, I'm Austrian as well. I got Austrian citizenship.
Should I say congratulations? I don't know if it's a compliment or not.
Yeah, well, it's quite it's nice that I'll be able to kind of vote where I live.
Because if I say congratulations, that would
it makes
some people might get offended about their current citizenship. Like, why is it better than?
Yeah. Well, in my case, it was a special case. I think the word is reparation. So my grandmother actually grew up in Vienna, and she was Jewish, and she had to leave, when the Nazis were here. So. Yeah, Austria has a thing where anyone who's a descendant of someone like that can apply for Austrian citizenship. So that's why
because I was wondering how did you get it with 5 years here? That's a bit early.
It's nothing to do with how long I've been here. Yeah, and it's a very peculiar thing for me because it feels like I don't really believe in coincidence, but the fact that I moved here maybe around 5 years after she died, and I'd never been to Vienna before. And me and my girlfriend have ended up kind of living on the next road to the one she grew up on. So I walk past it, on a regular basis and give it a pat on the wall. And it's a peculiar thing. But yeah, in terms of making friends.
Let's come back to that later because I'm interested to hear more about this part.
Yeah.
So your grandma always lived in Vienna?
She
flew after the war.
She
during the war.
I should remember more of the details, but she moved when she was 18.
She went. She came to London.
To London, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So the man who eventually became my grandpa, her husband Lawrence. Their family, her and Lawrence's parents were already friends, like. Lawrence's family, the Goldrei is my surname, used to, go to Vienna, I think, on a fairly regular basis. So, once it became clear that things were not looking so great for Jewish people in Vienna, she was sent off to London. Unfortunately, her, the rest of her family, her sister mainly, didn't have so much luck. She was called Josephine, and she ended up, we never found out 100% what happened to her, but I think she ended up in a concentration camp. So yeah, she left Vienna at a different time to my grandmother, and decided to go a different route through different countries in Europe.
How does she did she talk a lot about those times?
No, she didn't actually. It was more through my dad. I guess, a child has a different relationship with their parents to a grandchild. But my dad used to sort of...
How did she describe the times?
Well, this is the thing.
When she talked to your dad?
He didn't really... I don't think she told him very much about it at all. Since that... it's kind of... Partly since moving to Vienna, I've become a lot more interested in her life. And my aunt, my dad's sister, I think she had a bit more luck finding things out. Well, not luck is the wrong word. Finding things out from her mum. So there were a few occasions. She brought my grandmother to Vienna on a trip once, which I think was kind of quite emotional for her. And my aunt Diane used to occasionally sort of write down, she would interview her parents and write down the results. But yeah, so my grandmother moved. I think she was the first to move. Her dad had died of a stroke the year before. Her sister, as I say, went a different route through Europe and sadly didn't make it. And her mum, I think, stayed in Vienna a bit longer because she liked living here. And she eventually moved over to England as well. So, they were in the same country.
Do you think there's still traces of people who support those times nowadays here in Austria? Because I don't know if you saw the news just a few days ago. public train in Austria broadcasted
Oh yes,
Hitler's speech,
yeah,
parts
well,
of
yeah.
Hitler's speech.
I think that answers the question. Yeah, and I have to admit, I find it very peculiar whenever there's. I think this happened a lot during COVID as well. Whenever there's some march about something, often you get these very kind of right-wing groups sort of, for some reason, adding themselves onto the end of the march. And there were, during COVID, there were the people sort of anti-mask, COVID is a hoax kind of thing. And those groups also seem to, the Venn diagram of who's into what, which of those things seem to have quite a big crossover for, these different groups. And yeah, on one occasion, there was sort of one of these marches taking place just, one or two roads away from the one my grandmother grew up on. And, with these people clearly, wearing, the clothing with sort of symbols on them. I as far as I know, I think they have to make themselves known to the police or whatever. But yeah, I find that very weird. Yeah, I don't like it. But I guess the argument is it if there are people like that out there, is it better better that they're known and the police are keeping an eye on them rather than they're sort of underground and whatever. But yeah, it does make me very uncomfortable. But back in England we have people like that too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you get like far right idiots wherever you live, I think. Yeah.
Anti-Semitic, there are still also as well.
Yeah, in London. Yeah, you occasionally get so Golders Green is where my grandmother and grandpa ended up settling in London, and that's a sort of very Jewish area. But yeah, every now and again you'll see in the news, someone's been drawing swastikas, around that area, and yeah.
Yes, are you somehow, and we will go back to the Austrian friends. I haven't forgotten about that. You somehow are in touch with the Jewish community, either here in Austria or back in London, or how is your relation to your origins?
Yeah, well, I'm not religious in any way. So yeah, my dad was technically Jewish because his mother was Jewish, but he was
with descendancy mostly, right?
Yeah, he was atheist. I'm atheist. But that, that's not to say I don't, have respect for Jewish people.
But you don't specifically get in touch with them just because you're Jewish.
Yeah.
So that's not the reason why would you call another Jew on the phone, let's hang out together because we're both Jewish, right? It's not that you are looking
No, I mean,
for them.
I don't know if have I made any friends here who are Jewish? I don't know. I mean, I've certainly been to the Jewish Museum and so on, which, perhaps if I didn't have that, that sort of origins, maybe I wouldn't have done that. I mean, it's certainly on my mind a fair bit, now that I am in this city that my grandmother had to leave. She went from Vienna to London. I've gone from London to Vienna. I do find that very peculiar. And as I say, I often walk past her old house. It's been kind of changed, the front of it has sort of changed a bit since then. But yeah, I do. Yeah, if I was someone who believed in coincidence, I would find it. I'd probably think, oh, for some reason this was all meant to happen. I don't believe that. I do just feel quite weirded out by it.
Sometimes it's nice to leave these things open and not try to explain them. It's just the way it is.
Yeah, and it does. I mean, because I've still got this Jewish sounding surname, and I guess some people perhaps might assume I'm Jewish before they meet me. Some of my facial features probably look a bit Jewish.
I think your last name is the only thing that hints you that you might be Jewish.
And I happy if someone thinks that. I'd be proud to be associated with that. And
but how do you breaking in, or are you trying to break in Austrian circles of friendships,
Yeah,
society,
definitely.
and how hard is that?
When I realized I was moving here, I initially, possibly some of this is based on the view of like what in England we call expats, are English expats. You know, we don't have such a good reputation. Normally, if you see something on the news in England about expats or Brits living abroad, it's like normally some like football hooligans causing chaos in some other European city. So, and I kind of, for some reason, only, when I first moved here, I thought I kind of don't want to be a kind of boring English person who only hangs out with other English people and doesn't, try and integrate into the society here. So I was actually mainly trying to make friends with Austrian people. So Kati and Ingmar, who I mentioned earlier, these photographers, they're both Austrian. And I also, was looking for, even though my German wasn't good and still isn't that great, I was sort of, my preference was to work in a kind of Austrian company, where people are speaking German and, so that my German might improve from being around, people speaking it all day. Obviously, it's tough to get a job like that if you can't speak it in the first place. So I really tried, and have met some nice Austrian people, but maybe in the past year or so, I've not even really intentionally, but I've sort of ended up in some more like British groups, and I joined a WhatsApp group of British people who meet in the pub every week, and a few other things like that, and and even I guess because my street photography walks are in English. People who come can all speak English, and they're often people who've just moved here, not necessarily from England, but so I have ended up probably making more friends with English people, or not necessarily Austrian people, and that's led to more work for me, and so it has been very helpful. But I do think people, I would like to get better at German and be able to integrate more. But for now, that's not.
Well, a citizenship is a good start.
Yeah. Well, the problem with that is that I think I used my Austrian passport for the first time for that trip to Rome a few weeks ago, and obviously when you're waving one of those around, the guy at customs sort of
might speak to you in German.
German is fluent. Yeah, so I had no idea what this guy was saying to me, but I got through. But yeah.
But anyway, well, it's expectable because not a lot of people get, I think, the citizenship by grandma or grandfather. Or is as I say, that particular the particular reason I was able to get it was because of reparations. Austria decided a few years ago that ancestors of people who had to leave due to the Nazis were allowed to apply to be Austrians themselves. Yeah. What's your account name on Instagram? Because the website is already has a link in the description.
Yeah. So my account on Instagram is number 6, but both words.
What does it mean?
Out. I'll just put So NUMBERSIX, all one word. It's a very nerdy reason. It's he's the main character in a kind of not quite sci-fi, a British TV series from the 1960s, I think, rather than 70s. And it's this very psychedelic, weird, mysterious series.
Like everything in the 60s?
Yeah. But I would say, possibly more psychedelic than some things. But yeah, and you never 100% find out what was going on, which is part of the fun of it. But it's, this guy has for some reason quit his job, possibly in the government, and he goes home. This sort of gas goes through the keyhole to his room, and he wakes up and he thinks he's still in his house, and he opens the doors, and he's in this mysterious place called the Village, and people have stopped referring to him by his name. They call him Number 6.
Mm-hmm.
So every episode of the series, a different guy called Number 2 is trying a different technique to kind of get information out of Number 6 as to why he quit his job.
Mm-hmm.
And, as I say, it's so mysterious. You don't know what his job was, and you don't know why he quit. You never find out. But, I just love how this guy is like, I am not going to let them get me. And it's filmed in this beautiful little town in Wales called Portmeirion,
Mm-hmm.
which is... if you ever go to the United Kingdom, I highly recommend going there. It's a great setting for it because the architecture there is really, really crazy. It's a seaside town.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of what makes the series great. I think it's location. And in recent years, I don't know if it still happens actually, but there's a music festival there named after him called Festival Number 6.
You probably get a lot of followers on Instagram every time the festival goes on.
Actually, when I went, I think I went about 6 years ago, perhaps. I thought, everyone else going to that is also presumably going to be a massive fan of The Prisoner.
They have no
like
idea
me.
what it is.
Well, yeah. So I thought I had this special, not special, but I had this jacket. Like I bought a secondhand jacket and got it tailored to look like his. It has this kind of white...
And you were completely ignored.
Yeah. I was the only person wearing that when I got there. And I just had this vision of like me walking around Portmeirion.
No one looking at you.
Everyone going, all right, mate. Oh, that's such a great jacket. Oh, be seeing you. And, all these quotes from the series.
Hey, where did you get that?
Yeah. But I think maybe in the whole, 3 days I was there, maybe one or two people sort of smiled at me. But it's a great festival anyway. And actually one of my street photos was taken while I was there. You can see it on my homepage. I won't say which one, but because I like to also keep a bit of mystery.
Like Number 6.
yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, I think for the first time this episode, it's not only on Spotify, it's also in the international.at. Yes, this is a new thing, and yes, there's more explanation coming to that. But for now, this is the first episode of the new season, and that's because Michael Goldrei is also the winner of Vienna Streets, the street photography competition, which and his pictures will be featured in the upcoming issue of the International magazine and also on the website with a dedicated article, of course, which is great because he's been featured already at The Guardian and BBC, and now he's been featured to the International. We can get a little from his fame already.
Yeah.
Thanks.